Kaminsky on Denver's talk station, 630 KHOW.
Hey, good morning. It's Thursday. I love Thursdays. As you know, I'm Ross. Thanks for starting your day with me. I just realized I went to Everything for Offices yesterday over there in Aurora, and I bought my third Kaminsky chair. They actually updated the chair a little bit, and I left it upstairs, and I forgot to bring it down. So at some point during the show, not while I'm on the air, but like during a news broadcast or something, I'm going to go get my new chair and bring it down. Oh my gosh, I hope you had a good Wednesday. I was kind of lazy yesterday. I got almost nothing done, except going to Everything for Offices and buying another Kaminsky chair, and I feel good about it. I took a nap yesterday. Ruben, our little French bulldog, Ruben napped near my knees, kind of, or feet, somewhere down there. So the dog and I took about a 47-minute nap. Not a big nap, but sometimes it's just what you need. And then I started today off with a bowl of Lucky Charms, which is a new thing. It's not. I don't mean it's brand new. I don't mean I've never had Lucky Charms before. But it's not usually where I go. But I think this morning I just felt like little chunks of sugar with food coloring and all kinds of just weird artificial stuff going on in my cereal bowl. And so I did that, and I feel great about it. I feel absolutely great about it. We got a lot to talk about today, obviously. We got some interesting guests coming up, too. Let you know, coming up an hour from now, Meredith Feynman, who has written a new book called Brag Better, Master the Art of Fearless Self-Promotion. And I think it's a really interesting topic for me personally, because in my previous life, when I was waving my hands and yelling on the trading floor in Chicago, the last thing I wanted was to be well known at all. It's just, I wanted to stay far away from that. When you're on the trading floor, mostly what you want to do is to make money and be anonymous. And now I'm in a job where I have to talk about myself a little bit, and it doesn't come naturally. And then separate from my job, I think generally people could probably benefit from saying more good things about themselves. So anyway, we'll talk about that. And then in the 8 o'clock hour, Ron Engels, Gilpin County Commissioner, is going to join us to talk about how things were in Gilpin County yesterday in Black Hawk and Central City, which was the first day that casinos could open again. So we got all that to do. Now, where is this tweet? Okay, this just popped up on Twitter a couple minutes ago, and this is so ridiculous. And as my grandma would have said, apropos of nothing, that I just have to share it with you, because this is one of the silliest things I've read in a long time. But you ever hear a story about somebody who lives a lifestyle and whose brain functions in a way that you can barely imagine? Like, you know that this kind of thing happens on this planet, but and in fact, this kind of thing could be happening very near you. It's not like I'm going to tell you about something that's happening, deep in the heart of the Niger River Delta or something like that, right? This could be happening anywhere, and it's just so outside my experience. Let's just put it that way to be polite. Okay, here we go. So this is apparently from the Financial Times, as seen on Twitter this morning. And I quote, "As a freelance journalist, blessed with an inheritance as well as a venture capitalist husband, my work wardrobe is split in a rather self-contradictory manner between Chanel tweed blazers that I wear to interviews and athleisure." Got it? Like athletics and leisure. And athleisure for when I toil in front of a computer. Neither fit the brief for working from home while under constant electronic surveillance. Quote, "Casual but groomed," advised a personal shopper who encouraged me to look at boiler suits, I don't know what a boiler suit is, in linen or denim. Not one to veer too far from the familiar, I turned instead to Olivia von Halle, I think, Halle, for silk pajamas in colors guaranteed to make the dullest Zoom meeting come alive. Armed thus with the advantages of wealth, I was insulated from many of the pandemic's challenges, but the reality of life and death remains a great leveler. How about that? How would you feel after sitting down and writing that? I don't know what her name is, and I'm not mad at her. Her life is her life. It's amusing. But what I think is, what I would really like to know, and I'm not going to make an assumption here, but what I would really like to know is whether she realizes that almost nobody, even readers of the Financial Times, can relate to anything she just wrote.
She certainly does not need Meredith Feynman's book.
Oh, that's for sure. Good call. Way to tie things together there, Producer Shannon. I mean, casual but groomed, advised a personal shopper who encouraged me to look at boiler suits in linen or denim. Can somebody please text me at 57739 and tell me what a boiler suit is? And then maybe we can buy one for Shannon. Or maybe we can follow her advice here and turn to Olivia von Halle for silk pajamas in colors guaranteed to make the dullest Zoom meeting come alive. I mean, geez, that might be for me. We're on YouTube Live right now. All right. Anyway, I won't take any more of your time with that. I just thought that was one of the most ridiculous things that I've seen in a while. It just popped up. Okay, what else? Saw a headline at Politico yesterday. Interesting story. The headline is, what Colorado is getting right about reopening. The subhead is, while surrounding states see spike in virus, Colorado's methodical approach is working. It's an interesting piece, in part because of what it contains that isn't adequately captured in the headline or subhead. So let me just share a little bit of this with you, because after all, most folks listening to the show are in Colorado. Not all, but most. And those who aren't might learn a thing or two, including just about how articles are written. So here's what Politico says. Colorado was the first Democratic-run state to reopen from a coronavirus lockdown, and so far it has avoided the fresh spikes in infection rippling across the West. Its measured approach could be a lesson for the country on how to reopen effectively. Governor Jared Polis stood out because he embarked on a slow and methodical economic recovery in late April, even before the White House's stay-at-home guidelines expired. Polis limited when restaurants and other businesses could reopen, at first only allowing curbside pickups at stores, imposing strict social distancing on salons and other personal services, and prohibiting gatherings over 10 people. Now, as for me, I do think that Polis handled this quite well early on, but was pretty slow reopening once the data became so clear as to who the people really were who were at risk. But anyway, I will debate that another time. Let me just continue with this. Colorado also benefited from a relatively young, healthy, active population, thank you very much for describing me so well, that bought into the state public health officials' message about wearing masks and social distancing. That experience could influence other states as localized outbreaks pop up, even as people clamor for a more rapid reopening of the economy and something resembling a more normal way of life. Polis has balanced libertarian sensibilities, and boy does Jared get excited when anyone ever writes about him as libertarian. Normally, when someone does write about him as libertarian, he emails me and says, "Hey Ross, see, I'm libertarian." And I say, we can talk when you're no longer in favor of single-payer health care. Anyway, Polis has balanced libertarian sensibilities with public health doctrine since issuing a statewide stay-at-home order on March 26th. His safer-at-home reopening, which even drew praise from President Donald Trump, was more like a tiptoe than a march. Dine-in service at restaurants didn't begin until May 27th. Gyms and pools only followed at limited capacity this month, and bars and residential summer camps can only begin operating at limited capacity this week. And thanks to the listener who just sent me a text about boiler suits, I will check that out in a second. Now, Politico says that's in contrast to Utah, which never imposed a stay-at-home order and where gyms and dine-in service began on May 1st. The average number of new infections has roughly doubled there since the beginning of this month. In Arizona, where casinos, restaurants, and gyms opened by mid-May, hospitalizations are up 40% since June 1st, and the health department recently told hospitals to fully activate emergency plans. Polis says, we're only a few steps ahead of this virus. We can't let good news give us a false sense of security. We see some of our neighboring states, Arizona and Utah, moving the wrong way. And they also note that in Boulder, there were about 30 new cases after some parties with University of Colorado students. And there's some concern that the state caseload could surge if people who travel back and forth across state lines bring the virus with them. Now, all right, I get all that. A little bit interesting, I suppose. But I think what's really interesting and important to think about, especially from the sense of a guy who is always trying to avoid data abuse, is where the story goes next. An early and alarming surge of cases in mountain communities and in Denver in March may have scared many Coloradans into wearing masks and observing social distancing, said Lindsay Keegan, infectious disease expert at the University of Utah. That's a contrast to Utah, where the pandemic arrived much later and where public health officials are now pleading with residents to get on board. So while it may be true that what the state government did here in Colorado and Polis' stay-at-home order and all that, while it may be true that that made a significant difference in the spread of the virus in our state, it may not be as true as some people think. Remember, a bunch of people came to Colorado very early in this and brought the virus with them. There was a big outbreak of 12 or 13 people at once in a ski town who apparently all caught it from one tourist who was visiting from Australia, of all places, who had it but didn't know she had it and didn't test positive for it until she got back to Australia. But then there was, that outbreak here. There was, other outbreaks in Eagle County. There was some in Aspen. Then there were some in Denver. So I think one of the key things to think about, or ask ourselves, when we hear these stories about outbreaks in states right now, and not just outbreaks because testing numbers are higher, so they're finding more cases, but actually an increasing percentage of the tests they do give, an increasing percentage is coming back positive. In addition to there being more tests, but a higher percentage of positives, which is an important marker. What's worth asking is Colorado's relatively successful path by now, was that because of the specific moves that Governor Polis made? And that probably is a factor. But could it also be simply that Colorado was one of the first states to be hit pretty hard? Shortly after Washington State, which was really first, or, first in terms of widespread outbreaks that made the news. Colorado was very shortly after that, and then Polis did what he did. But also, it's true, the people in Colorado saw, okay, there's a lot of cases here, and we're not going to be morons. I know there's people who are going to go to CNC Coffee to make a point and stand around a bunch of strangers. I get it. It's not smart, but okay. Most people in Colorado said, you know what? I'm just going to stay a few feet further away from other people, and I'll wear a mask for a little while, and I'll wash my hands. So now we seem to be in good shape. But remember, again, it hit us earlier. So it might just be that these other states are on the same path as Colorado, but a month or two behind us. So it'll be really interesting to see how people in these other states behave. especially in a very red state like Texas, that would be inclined to follow closer to President Trump and his refusal to wear a mask and his ongoing claims that the virus is no big deal, will they follow him and act as if the virus is no big deal and allow their case numbers to go up? Or, will some of these states have people who act a little more carefully? The other thing I think that's working against having people react in a very panicky kind of way is some of the data out of the CDC. We didn't talk about it much on the show, but a few weeks ago, the CDC released something that showed, and they had multiple scenarios because they're still guessing about a lot of things about the virus. And in what they called scenario 5, their most likely scenario, the overall death rate from their best guess at the number of people who have the virus, trying to guess how many people have it but don't show symptoms, and then trying to calculate a death rate based on including those people in the denominator, ended up at 0.04%. So if you were writing that out without a percent sign, 0.0004. And it's a perfect example of one of these situations that I like to talk about where you got a guy whose head is in the oven and his feet are in the freezer, and on average he's fine. Because on average, that death rate is simply nothing to worry about. But if you look at the death rate for people over the age of 65, it is something like 50 times higher, or I don't have the number in front of me. It was much, much, much higher. And the death rate for people under the age of, I think it was 40, is quite a bit lower. So I maintain my view, and we haven't talked about this in a while, but I'm mentioning it now just because the mainstream media in particular, I think in an effort to scare people and to hurt Trump and to make Republicans look bad and blah, all the usual stuff, they are just running with these stories of all these states that have the increased number of cases. And I think it's really important that everybody remembers who it is we really need to protect. The risk of this virus to younger, healthy people, even if you get the virus, the risk is really, really low. It's not zero. There's a risk. But the people we need to protect are the people we almost always need to protect when there's a contagious disease, especially a respiratory contagious disease. We'll come back with the world going absolutely crazy.
This is Denver's Talk Station with Ross Kaminsky now. Tom Martino at 10, 630 KHOW, Denver. Now, Impact Traffic.
This report